Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Veil. And I am thrilled to welcome Chantal Landreville, who is a dear friend of mine and a relationship expert. And we are here today to celebrate her new book, Raise Your Love Signal. And you'll see your book in the background there as well. And I will leave a link, of course. I read the book. It is such a fun read. It also, I told Chantal that I think I'm reading this at the right time. Like I needed to hear many pieces of advice that you had in your book, and even some of the case studies were really resonated with me deeply. So I'm really excited to talk about this. I have had Chantal on this podcast before. So I will leave a link to our original interview and discussion, because we'll probably elevate from what your own personal story into what's happening in the world of relationship, and just get really into this discussion, because I think it's so important. Relationships are such a deep, important aspect of ourselves and of how we live in this world, and those who we have in our lives. And so we're going to hear everything about relationships and more with Chantal. So Chantal, thank you so much for being here today.
I'm so excited to be back. I love our talks on and offline. I'm excited about talking all things relationship. And it's great to hear that the book was really insightful for you, because when you've been working on something for such a long time, you've already moved on, and it's easy to kind of maybe doubt it or dismiss it. So to hear that from you, that's done so much work and that is in this, on this on a daily basis, it's great. So it serves the purpose of the idea behind the book. So thank you.
Absolutely. And we're always learning. Even I get to points where I feel, oh, I've done so much work and I get it. I understand myself. But also there are so many blind spots, or these hidden unconscious aspects, which I definitely love to focus on, because we can tend to be comfortable in the way that we feel, especially with love and conscious relationships, due to the fact of conditioning, due to the fact of our belief systems that are hardwired. So maybe just give a really quick overview of how you got to where you are today. I'd like to spend more focus on the actual, like the guts of the stuff, but I'd like for those who are new, who haven't heard of you before, just to have a really quick story of how you became so passionate in this realm of relationships.
Amazing. I'll try to make it quick. So I suffered myself from trying to find love for a massive part of my life. I was almost single for just a little under 18 years. And I had a consistent pattern of attracting emotionally unavailable partners. And through those years, the one thing that kind of saved me was I was always curious with personal development. I was always working on myself because of my curiosity and my thirst to learn. So there's certain things that I would apply, but at the same time, as I was growing and developing myself, I still couldn't figure out what the hell I was doing wrong in relationships and why I didn't feel that I was worthy of it. Until I did a massive form of deep therapy. And when that shed light, which only happened when I was 38 years old. So I was in a long-term relationship very young, from 19 to 26. I realized quickly that I wasn't with the right person. The person didn't really accept me for who I was as we evolved together in our relationship. And I mean, who does, right? When you're in your early 20s, you're just starting to get to know who you are. And I remember writing a list of everything I wanted to do and experience to make sure that the day that I would decide to be in a long-term relationship, I would have done what I wanted to do. That list took 10 years. And by the time I got to the 10 years, which was later in life, by 36, 37, 38, that's where I was like, oh, so that form of therapy, understanding that I was actually the issue, why I was attracting unemotional available people. My father had passed away when I was 2. So for me, men represented that they abandon you. So it was a way for me to stay in control. It was a way for me to protect my heart. So I was my own worst enemy at the end of the day. And then the journey started, because we always say this, right? Half of half of the problem is self-awareness. If you're able to identify what your problem is, then half of the work is done because you actually know what it is. So then you can go out and do the work. And one of the things that I also realized as I was doing all of this self-development work, and as we say, the work never ends, I was over-consuming. I wasn't actually integrating the work and applying it to my life. So I started applying it, and I would say those 5 years were like so key into my whole approach, not only on how I would go out into the dating world, but also with the relationship with myself. And one of the key components that was missing for me to attract the relationship I was looking for was that I did not even feel worthy of it. I did not feel worthy of receiving the love that I actually wanted to attract. So that's a massive problem. So when I did actually find my amazing partner, we've been together now for 5 years, I realized that it's one thing already. It's a difficult journey to get and make sure that you make the right person. And I don't typically like to use the word hard or work, but at the same time, they're true words that are a fact of the matter. There were a lot of work. There were hard years. So you want to make sure that you're going to succeed in a relationship. And I realized that I was equipped with the toolbox that I had built over the last 18, 20 years due to my curiosity and thirst to learn about all of this stuff, so I could apply it to my relationship, because we've never been taught how to navigate and be in relationship. And you know what? I realized we've not really been taught anything about what love really means other than what we've been conditioned with, which is very rom-com, Disneyfied, very romantic. And that we're in love with the idea of being in love, and that's not enough to sustain a long-term committed relationship. It's more than that. So the book is literally the best of everything I've learned in the last 20 years and the hundreds of thousands of dollars it cost me that I've actually applied personally in my own life, and I still do, and that have completely transformed the relationship I have with myself and the relationship I have with my partner.
I love that. And you touched on such a vital aspect, which actually is going to lead into my first question regarding habits and patterns that you have mentioned in your book. When you do so much self-work, we can become very accustomed to doing the work, searching inward, breaking habits, self-awareness, reflection, healing. And then there's this whole other, like, I think you mentioned, was it 5 years that you had to spend actually integrating it and putting it into practice? Like that,
Yes.
It takes such a long time and a great deal of commitment to actually start to, walk the walk, walk the talk, walk the talk, walk the talk, walk
Yes.
the walk and walk the talk. And I can completely relate to that due to the fact of being on this, really deep self-discovery journey. And then when it comes to certain things, I'm very closed. I'm very closed. So maybe touch on some of those common patterns and habits that you see within people, and also with regards to feeling worthy of receiving love on a relationship, with a conscious, deeper relationship within ourselves, within a relationship dynamic.
Yes. So one of the things that I see with a lot of the clients I work with, I would say it's probably like 80% of them, is that people think that they want love and they want to be in a relationship. And as we start doing the work together and I question them, I realize that they have the same problem I had. I had a brick wall around my heart. My heart was not open. So the problem is, if you want to be and have a really loving, healthy relationship, vulnerability is part of it. And vulnerability comes only with having your heart open. And that's where I think there's a massive disconnect. People are so afraid. There's that massive fear. And I'm realizing how bad it actually is. And I think back through my days, as you said, it took me 5 years, because here's the thing. By the time we realize or understand this stuff, so in my case, I was 38, 39 years old. Here I am, navigating through my life for 38 years with this belief and this pattern and just this mindset. So to change it overnight is not going to happen. And I was very lucky to have a friend. You know, we all have those moments that somebody says a key phrase, a key word, we're ready to receive it, and we have that aha moment. And she had told me, Chantal, how do you expect that you'll be in a relationship one day if you can't even be vulnerable with your own best friends? Because I was so shut down, you know, type A, very driven personality. I left home very early, had to be on my own. So I was used to just handling shit on my own. That's it. Whenever I'd have a problem, I'd cry myself to sleep alone in my corner and just work through my own stuff. And that's not a fun place to be. But when it's your system, you're just used to it. You're just like, I don't want to bother people. Nobody's going to understand me. They don't know what I'm really going through, right? You're just like all this inner chatter. So I started, and this is what I want to say, that people need to start in small baby steps on a daily basis to incorporate all these changes that once they identify what they are and be committed to it. So I started with vulnerability. So I reached out to one of my best friends and told her exactly what I was going through, why I wanted to work on this. And I communicated to her what I actually needed from her. I was like, when I'm going to call you, it's going to be really difficult for me to actually express myself, what I'm going through. I don't need you to give me advice. I don't need you to criticize me. I don't need you to try to fix it. I just need you to hold space for me. And she was like, perfect. That's it. It was clear, right? I said exactly what I needed. I felt already in a relationship of trust. So, oh man, it took 8 months for me to be really comfortable. So and I'm reiterating this because it's not easy to change something that you've done most of your life. And when I started doing it, I saw that it was really helpful. I was like, wow, this is actually not bad. And sometimes we just need to talk through our own bullshit, right? We realize we all have the answers within, as you say all the time, but it's just having that space where you feel safe enough to be able to express yourself without feeling judged, without being told what to do. And then that went so well that I moved to a second friend, I moved to a third friend, and then I started integrating that at work. And I was like, wow, this is so much lighter to not be able to have to deal with everything on my own. And what that did is that when I got into my relationship, which is a whole other level of vulnerability in romantic relationship, my muscle had been working. So it was much easier for me to surrender and let go and remind myself with my little inner chatter, Chantal, this is what you've worked for. And the perfect example was when Jeff and I moved in together. I remember I said, okay, who's going to pay what? How are we going to do this? And he was like, I got you. You don't have to worry about anything. And I remember, are you crazy? No, 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 no. It's not going to happen. I'm like, and he just took me by the shoulders and looked at me straight in the eyes with his big blue eyes and said, Chantal, do not take away something from me that I can and that I want to do. And that for me was like, this is the moment you've been working for. Like, this is the time for you to receive this and let the man that you love, that you trust, that you feel safe with, support you in the way that he wants to receive. And that was like, you know, from that moment on, it was just, but I can still catch myself today. And that's why I want to mention it. And the book is so important. That's why I created a guide that was something easy to read and refer back to, because it's easy for us to go back to our old ways. I still catch myself, you know, sometimes retracting when things go down and want to isolate. But then I talk to myself. I catch myself very quickly. Chantal, you're not alone anymore. You've changed. You're not that old person. It's not part of you anymore. You have your circle. You've built, you know, a circle of support, and you feel safe sharing and expressing yourself and talking through your stuff. So it's an ongoing process. And that's why, you know, awareness is such a beautiful thing, because when you know, you can literally talk to yourself. And that's why if you've worked on step-by-step little baby steps, because, you know, when we put a big goal, we get discouraged and we just stop doing it. It's easier for us to work that muscle and develop it. It's like anything you want to do in life, right? If you want to become a professional athlete, it's not going to happen in 24 hours. If you want to have that six-pack ab, it's not going to happen in 24 hours. And then you have to maintain it and you have to sustain it. So I think that a lot of people, when they're looking for love, get lost into the instant gratification and don't do the actual real self-reflection that you need to be in a long-term committed relationship, including opening your heart. And there was a beautiful thing that I realized a couple weeks ago when I was at that retreat in Maui. I was with strangers for 3 days, and I realized very, very quickly how in just 3 days we had connected and shared stuff probably most people would never share with anyone else. There was just this vulnerability, but we invested the time and we had a safe space that was created for us to open. So this to say that I realize people do not invest the time and they do not create a safe space for people to open, to share. So we all need collectively to start doing that more if you want to reap and have more deep, meaningful human connections at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I have a lot to say about that, but I'm going to keep going. That's a whole other topic. But yes, you are right. Not enough people listen and connect. And even in the spiritual community, it is, I've been shocked, truthfully, at how much people don't listen. Love to talk or give advice, but listening and being there and just giving that space for someone to be heard, is huge. And that also, I feel, in childhood is quite common, the not being seen, not being heard, not being even loved, does play into these relationships that we develop in our later life. Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why there's a part in the book that I talk about communication, and there's like 3 main tips that if you apply them and you practice them yourself, you will see how different it can be in the language of any relationship, because we all have to be more conscious with ourselves and how we show up. And you're right. I mean, the average person does not does not listen. They passively listen, right? They're already thinking, how am I going to respond? They're already trying to cut you off. They're already wanting to put in, as you said, they haven't felt heard, so they want to express themselves. So I totally agree with you.
Yeah. So the next one I'm curious about is, how does someone work through lack of trust in love? So you talked about the heart being shut down, but that, I mean, it could play into this, but I also feel it's a bit different. But with someone who's completely lost trust, like if maybe they've gone through cheating or abusive behavior or lack of connection altogether, and just turn their back on love altogether.
I think it's with the inner conversation that you need to have with yourself, because what happened to you doesn't define you, right? So we have a choice. I always say we have the luxury of choosing every single day when we get up. There's a lot of people out there that don't have a choice. We have the choice to choose. So it's like anything in life. I could be sitting, and saying, oh my God, I lost my dad when I was 2, and, boohoo for me. I went through all this stuff. It was so hard. And kind of like victimize the situation. And it's not diminishing it, because I think it's really important to grieve who that person was and what you went through. That's really important as well. But it's the narrative that you choose to say. And I always say, when these things happen to you, most of the time, there was a part of you that could have been the problem in some shape or form. So it's like, what did I not pay attention to? What did I choose to ignore as a sign when something was telling me inside that, I should have listened? How did I convince myself otherwise? Maybe I wasn't involved. Maybe I wasn't engaged. Maybe I wasn't listening when my partner was communicating. So I think it's really important to question yourself on why that happened to you, not from a victim perspective, but from, what do I need to learn and grow to make sure I'm not going to repeat the same thing going forward? Because if that keeps happening to you, there's something that you're responsible for sure. Like when I was attracting always unemotional, available men, I was the problem. I was accepting the behavior. I was tolerating the behavior. I accepted that I was number 2 all the time because I didn't have enough self-worth. So if somebody needs to build their trust again, it really needs to start within, obviously. But it's doing again these small little exercise, like if you're struggling with self-trust or trust in its own, where can you integrate it on a daily basis in a smaller dose, other than being in a relationship with someone, that you can practice it? So let's say, for example, Tara suffers from mistrust in her friendships because she's often abandoned, or, you say something to a friend and they slip it out to another friend, or what's the case. So you would go into another friendship very guarded, right? You'd be like, no, I'm not going to say this. I'm not going to say that. So you need to trust yourself on who you can try it again. And the thing is, trial and error come together, like they just do. I still try things in my relationship that can work and can't work. But if I don't try it, I won't know if it works. And try not to be in that jaded mindset, because that won't serve its purpose. You're the only one that's keeping yourself from potentially exploring what could be, or something new, right? So that's where I say, again, it's that inner reflection, asking yourself the hard questions. Was I responsible for something? List, like, what did I need to learn or understand that I haven't? And how can I integrate a form of trust in other areas of my life to practice and redevelop my muscle that I completely lost? Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely, it does, for sure. And this actually kind of leads into, in your book, you talked about the roots of our behavioral patterns from our formative years. So this is all kind of tying into these threads of our past and how they play into how we feel about relationships, how we feel about ourselves. And what would be some of the common patterns that you've seen in the dating culture based on the family models and behaviors? What are some examples?
Oh my God, one, that heart, like that mistrust, that guarded heart, that fear of rejection, that fear of actually abandoning yourself and wanted to open yourself up. So we'll have, for example, and I love to refer to this with attachment styles, right? Attachment styles is a great tool. If you don't know what they are, that gives you a bigger picture why you show up in relationship the way you do and how you act, right? So an anxious attachment style, for example, which means that when you were younger, your parents weren't around, you never knew if they would be there to support you emotionally or not. So you were always like one foot in, one foot out. So you're needy, you develop this neediness. So I see this pull push, or the avoidant, which is the guarded heart, like I was. So we'll often see that push pull method where people say, I want to be in a relationship, but because of their anxious attachment style, they're like not really present, or they feel needy, or an avoidant will come up and say, I'm all in, and then escape really, really quickly. So, and it's funny because I think it's like, if I remember the data correctly, and I apologize if I'm not saying the exact numbers, but like 70% of the population is avoidant.
Hmm.
And then I think it's like 40
Wow.
or 50 anxious. So you don't have a huge population that's like, so hence
Wow.
why there's a lot of single people out there, because a
Yeah.
lot of people do not want to commit.
Yeah.
And that's again where I say that for me, that's the biggest thing that I see, is that people they're not walking their talk because they think they want something, but they're not taking actionable steps to actually what they're verbally saying.
Yeah.
So being in relationships takes a commitment, and so many people are afraid of commitment, or have a desire for massive commitment, but for the wrong reasons, because of course, they're seeking attention. For them, they also, it's like a game of being able to say, I will get them. I was actually with a client yesterday where, when we were talking through the situation, she's like, I know this person is toxic for me. I don't, nothing of what we do when we do together is actually healthy or good. I feel, I leave that person and I feel massively empty. And we came to realize very quickly it's because her father had the same behavior, and he abandoned the family, and he also was infidel, unfaithful,
Mhm.
unfaithful. And that started a lot of verbal abuse within the relationship with the mother. So it's like subconsciously she feels that this is normal all of a sudden being in that kind of relationship because it's what she saw happening. So I would say, for me personally, what I'm seeing is like the lack of investment in wanting to open our heart, because we've suffered a lot from not being seen, heard, taken care of the way we wanted to in our family dynamics.
Yeah, and referring to your client who is or has been in the toxic relationship, and I've been there before myself, where the relationship isn't healthy, it's not good. It leaves this like ick feeling in the pit of your stomach. I mean, for me, I had to drink to cope at times, even, but
Mm-hmm.
I was so dedicated to making it work because on some level it felt right. And
Mm-hmm.
so these are so subconscious. Like everything, I just have to mention this to those listening, watching. Everything that we're talking about is under the surface. These
Yeah.
are things that it's really tough. You unfortunately you can through observation and self-awareness, as Chantal mentioned, but a lot of it is so subliminal, subterranean, so deep down that requires a lot of attention and a lot of compassion to work through, because it can come in from deep traumas, things that we can put ourselves in very unhealthy dynamics, but they feel right, and it
Yeah.
kills us. It
Yes.
kills us. It's like the most unhealthy place to be. And like I've said, I've been there many times. So yeah, I understand that one very well. um
Yeah. So it's, I mean, I know your audience knows this, but it's important to ask yourself what you saw as a child with your parents, if they were together or not. Like, understand their relationship together, understand the relationship you have with your mom and your father, or your main caregivers. It's because that can give
yeah,
so much information on why you are showing up, and all those subconscious beliefs that you have on why you're showing up in relationship or accepting things, like you were just saying, that you fundamentally know they're wrong, but you're just like, oh, this is the right thing. It's because that's what you saw and that's what you were taught.
yeah. And how about if people have given up on relationships altogether? And it almost maybe could fall under the avoidant style, but maybe again, avoidant, or people who've gone through really unhealthy relationships or been betrayed, or gone through the ringer in love. And maybe they've just completely, I feel like a lot of people have, truthfully, but you can share your advice on that, or your insight, your intel on that. But those giving up on a relationship altogether, is this a healthy option? So if people have gone through so much difficulty in relationship and love, and they just want to completely detach and live on their own, be on their own, work on themselves, and just find happiness on their own, is that a healthy option? And why are relationships important in our lives?
Well, first off, woo, so much to say on that. I think that it's so important. There's nothing wrong if you want to stay single and you want to be on your own for the rest of your life. Listen, I was that person for a long time. But what I did do was continuously work on myself and deal with the issues that I had identified. And I was curious about finding out. I've always had this knack in me. I always try to understand the why behind a behavior or something. So I'm naturally curious to understand human behavior. And that, I think, is where people don't take the time to know themselves well enough. And this is super, super, super key. And I will say this makes a massive difference to people that feel that way, like you just described. There is nothing wrong if you want to stay alone and you're comfortable in that. But I want you to ask yourself, are you running away from the potential of being in the relationship that you would like? The one thing, and I talk about this in the book, people need to ask themselves, what is my relationship with love? And what do I want my relationship with love to be? I will tell you this. That's how I started my whole research on this book and the program, because I would question myself, what is love anyways? And the girl that's been studying this for 20 years, I was struggling answering the question myself. So I told myself the average person probably doesn't even know what it is. And when I started doing my research and my coffee table talks with like all the women that helped me to build a program, there was never once a response about love being about the self. It was always about
Mm.
other people. Always, 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 always. And here's the thing, Tara. We have been taught that love is this romantic, beautiful, amazing, great feeling bubble. You know, we've been Disneyfied and rom-commed about love. We're in love with the idea of being in love. The problem is, I've come to realize it myself, is that that idea of being in love is not enough to sustain a real, healthy, long-term committed relationship. It isn't. So we have been so conditioned to be taught that love is this one dimension, and it's not at all. So I want to invite people that are in that space to really ask themselves, what do I want my relationship with love to be? And what is actually love to me? Because if your relationship with love was toxic, as we just talked about, right? This is what it actually means. You're going to continuously attract these people that are toxic because it's what you think love is. It's what you've seen. If your relationship with love has always been about giving and being the overgiver, and you're taking care of everybody, you don't make room to receive in a relationship, you're going to continuously attract, you know, unbalanced relationship. So it's really important to define what that is for you. And when I did that exercise, and for what I'm getting to experience today in my own relationship, love for me is safe. It's safety.
Mm.
It's peace, peace of mind. It's, you know, respect, it's acceptance, and it's freedom. It's freedom because I feel free. My
Mm.
boyfriend could leave me tomorrow, something would happen to him, God forbid, knock on wood, but we have such a healthy dynamic, and the container is so beautiful. I haven't lost who I am as a person. I love who I am, my relationship with myself. So I would be grateful for the time that we actually had together. Yeah, of course I'd be sad, but I wouldn't be lost, because I've gotten to really experience that, what love, healthy love really looks like. And it's not fireworks, and it's not these butterflies, and it's, I think people really get trapped into all of these things, and they just have a lack of toolbox to help them succeed in the growth of the relationship. And one of them is investing the time to get to know each other, to get to understand my baggage, because we all come, especially later in life, we all come with our shit, right? Some of us are healed, some of us are not, some of us are still working on it. And I think it's being able to have that dynamic and that compassion and kindness to hold space for us to work through our stuff together. I need to give you time to understand my dynamic and why I react or get triggered or do certain things the way I do. Hence why self-awareness is super important. If you already know that your baggage, and I can describe like, this is how I am, these are my issues, I'm a control freak, I lose my temper when this, blah, 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 blah. It's easier to be able to communicate and then find the solutions with your partner on how you work through things, right? And that's where I think people completely lose sight of what it actually means to be in a relationship. And it's because one of the things is they've just never been taught. It's none of anybody's fault, right? Even if you end up being in a relationship that's toxic or that's healthy, a lot of people that are in healthy dynamics still struggle in relationship and go through infidelity and all that stuff because they don't water their own garden, and they've never been taught the tools on how to navigate through things or set things, fundamentals from the beginning.
Yeah, you
So,
mentioned two things I want to, I've been holding on to them in my mind because I feel they're really important. One of them is that butterfly feeling effect, where we feel the excitement. And that's beautiful. I mean, I'm a Libra, so I'm all about that. I chase these. I don't at all. I used to. But there's something about, I feel maybe it's like triggering something that we haven't had in a long time. So we hold on to the romance aspect or this like excitement, and it fills a void, and It does something to our system, maybe biologically.
Yes.
And that can be a bit of an addiction, I would think, like
Mhm.
even in the online space, meeting people where you don't end up sticking it out because that feeling starts to go away.
Yes.
And so actually that's going to lead, I'm going to remember my other one. I'll hold on to that because I do feel that's important, but this is going to lead into another aspect I wanted to touch on is the online dating space. And what are some of the trends and challenges there? Because this is probably one of the most common places to meet people nowadays is in the online space. But I know it's very, very difficult. It's very challenging. And I feel there can be a very superficial aspect to it. And there also can be that like my audience here, they're, looking for, or they're in conscious relationships where they have that deep connection with someone. Some people want that soulmate or that twin flame, which we don't have to talk about because I
Yeah.
don't get
A
me
whole other
started on
podcast.
that.
Yes.
But it's the same thing. Is that romanticizing is that relationship that is going to be otherworldly, that is going to take us into like a a different type of reality altogether, away from this,
Yeah.
this life.
Yeah. So
So
it's that
yeah.
serotonin. Am I cutting you off? Sorry.
No, it's all good. Yeah.
It's that serotonin, it's that excitement. And for me, there's nothing wrong with that. It's a great feeling, but that shit doesn't work. And trust me, I tried it for 18 years and I came to realize if I stay in that space, it doesn't work. And my poor boyfriend, I use him as my guinea pig on a daily basis for everything I do. But I've come to realize that it's also something that can be cultivated later in the relationship if you work at it.
It
And we've
becomes
been,
deeper. It becomes
yes,
deeper.
it
Mhm.
becomes deeper. And because you develop that safety, you're able to reveal yourself in ways that you never thought possible. So it also inspires different things and different possibilities. It's another kind of relationship. Hence why I say, before we go into the dating apps, it's really important to understand what you want your relationship with love to be. Because if you go into these dating apps or anything in any area of dating and you're romanticizing love, and I'm not saying that's wrong. If you want to stay in that space, it's fine, but you will get what you want. If you want to be in a conscious, level-headed, quality relationship where you feel accepted, respected, there's communication, there's, support, there's something that's building through the test of time, especially for people that are looking for those soulmates out there, you really need to get clear on that, what that
Yeah.
means to you. Because you have to change your way of dating and how you approach it on so many levels. And I never experienced butterflies or excitement when I started dating Jeff. Never, never,
Mm.
never, never. And the energy was floating. I remember on our first date, we often know our intuition is like, yes, second date, like go, go. And there was not a yes and there was not a no. It was kind of like this maybe. And I had never experienced that. So the energy was telling me to get to know this person.
Mm.
Give it time. Give it time. And we don't give time to get to
Yeah.
know someone.
Yeah. And I
So
haven't met Jeff, but I have such a good feeling about him. Like I can see like everything that you're talking about with regards to your relationship, I can tell for sure. And it's a beautiful thing. It really
yes, it's
is.
beautiful. And I wish
Yeah.
that for you, and I wish that for everybody that's looking for love. But we have to change our perspective on how we see it and everything that we've been taught about it.
Mhm.
So when I talk about when you want to go to dating apps, I think that people need to get, and I talk about this in the book as well, you need to get a little bit wiser on how you manage your dating apps. And Jeff and I met on a dating app, by the way. So 1 out of 4 people today still meet on a dating app. So
Mhm.
as much as we hate it, as much as we have, our ups and downs with it, and I say, I remember I had phases I was like really into it because of that. Oh yeah, meeting this person, this person. Of course, it's that high dopamine. And then, doesn't work, doesn't work, doesn't work. You're like, screw this, I'm wasting my time. I think we need to get smarter and filter better. So first, start getting more intentional yourself with how you create your profile, what you say in your profile, how you read other people's profile. Um, and don't get stuck into the whole texting back and forth journey, because here's what happened, especially when you
Yeah.
start flirting and you, oh my God, the scenarios we create in our head. And again, I was that person, girl. My God, I was always thinking, okay, we haven't even spoken or met yet, and I'm already projecting myself that I could do this and he's this. And I'm like, so I'm creating these stories in my head of romance, of like excitement. So of course, you know, when the down and it doesn't happen, you create your own disappointment. So be very careful how you exchange the text and filter. And the one thing that I insist a lot now on is have a call. Ideally a
Yeah.
video call, because we can pick up a lot, especially for all
Yeah.
your conscious audience out
Yeah.
there. We pick up a lot with a conversation.
Energetics.
Big time. Before you give your time, our time is precious. If you want to go sit down with someone, you have to make sure that you're going to give your time to someone you chose to give your time. And this is where I think people really kind of like don't realize that they're responsible for, is they don't filter properly. They don't scan. So, and on a conversation like this, if you're doing a call or a video call, have intentional questions, and questions that can reveal things about people that you can pick up in between the lines, like things like where they are in their self-development journey. And if, you know, it's not an interview process, it's having a conversation with someone where you're having really good conversation that you exchange. And then you can decide, you know what, I want to give my time to this person. And then you can decide if it's a coffee date or a brunch. I always say first dates should be short. If you choose to stay, make it longer, that's the beauty. But why sit down in a space with someone you've met for the first time for 4 hours, right? Because there was this whole thing on TikTok right now, and it got me so upset that a coffee date is someone that's cheap and doesn't want to give your time and whatever. Why the hell would I want to give you my time? I don't even know you. Like, let's start with something that we see if there's a connection, and then I'll give you my time. I actually think you're smarter this way than spoiling 3 hours of your time and you're disappointed the whole date, right?
True.
So these are things that cause a lot of the dating burnouts and frustrations and disappointments. And I also think that the other thing that people need to hold themselves accountable for, if you are seeing bad behavior online and you're not liking the way you're being responded or treated, call people out on their shit, because we need to stop people from doing it, right? It's like, if you don't like that the person takes 3 weeks to respond to you, why are you putting up with it?
Yeah.
Why? So
Exactly.
we have to take ownership and be really, really more intentional how we go about dating. And these are a few things that you can do that can make a massive difference. And the last thing is that if you've done that exercise about love and gotten clear on what you're looking for, what it does too, and I remember this, is that you will not get trapped in the serotonin highs and buzz and dopamine that we just talked about, right? So, I don't know, let's just say, like a crazy example, if one of your deal breakers is somebody that doesn't smoke, someone that's really, it's important for you that someone doesn't smoke, but this guy smokes. But, you know, everything else in their profile, and they're really cute, and you had a conversation that you're like, you know, oh my God, I really like this guy. Well, if you've done your homework properly and you're really clear and you love yourself enough to respect yourself, what your needs are that are deal breakers, right? Not wants and superficial stuff, like really, really, really deal breakers that you can't live without. I always say it's like air, breath, right? You just can't live without. Why are you going to waste your time? Why are you going to try to convince yourself? I can convince them to stop smoking. You know what? It's okay. It doesn't matter. And we do that all the time when we date, especially when we're hitting that dopamine hit that you talked about.
Yeah.
So it's really important to go into dating with a clear mind of what are your needs, like your deal breakers that really matter to you.
Yeah. And maybe even look at if there's a deal breaker, there, but you still feel it like you want to pursue, then maybe see what maybe is going back to one of those patterns of something deeper under the surface that needs to be looked at if we're not honoring ourselves.
Yes.
So there could even be something of a familiar type of family dynamic or something deeper within. And, you know, some relationships too, I have to add, some relationships show up in our life to kind of
Teach you.
to teach us and to probe at those areas within ourselves that we need to look at. And if we don't fix or acknowledge or go within and make those positive changes, then we're just going to keep setting ourselves up for failure in this domain. And I can speak to that very well, actually. So it's there's sometimes like those biggest, hardest lessons with relationships are those biggest moments where we can create change in our life. And so it
Yes.
is, yeah.
That's why the compassion that you mentioned earlier with yourself, to be kind to yourself when you're going through something, is, you know what, I needed to go through this to learn this and really get it, really understand. Because sometimes, the universe sends us a few slaps behind the head, and if things keep repeating, you're not listening, you're not paying attention, you're not making the change. That's when you
Give up.
until you understand. Yeah, exactly. So it's more like, oh, you know what, I actually saw. And so one of the things I love to say, the dating pool, that we need to change our perspective. We go into dating to check it off the list, right? To find our person. We have this mission, we have this outcome that we're looking for. I say go into dating with no outcome. Because I used to do this all the time. It was always like, oh, could he be the one? Could he be the one? Could he be the one? So you're setting yourself up for disappointment, and you have all these high expectations. So for me, it's go into dating and observing yourself. Everything you've identified, that you've learned, that you can't repeat, observe yourself and practice the skills that you've identified that you need to make sure that you're not going to repeat. That's the beauty of dating. You use it as that, and then shove in a lot of fun, choose activities and people that you're going to have fun with. And if there was no connection, at least you had a great conversation or you had a great activity together. And thank you very much. It's been great. But when we have always that expectation or that need to have an outcome, it's so disappointing. It's like, that's where people get like,
Yeah. And I want to, before we go into our last question or last topic here, I want to also mention the one other thing that I was holding on to was the safety aspect. And I've caught other, I wouldn't say relationship experts, but a lot of people in the conscious space just in general, because relationships are a huge aspect of us being human. So
Yes.
naturally, this is a very important aspect of our existence,
Yeah.
and a very important topic that we need to really lean into and work on. And I caught a segment a long time ago about the it could be even an unconscious need, but for women to feel safe, because also historically of things that have happened. And I'm not going to touch on gender stuff because I don't, but I also don't want it to be, just like black and white, either men and women.
Yes.
But historically, if you look back in history, there have been a lot of, we'll just say women for now, who have been in very oppressed roles in society. And it's really created this huge ripple effect of women all of a sudden having to become more masculine and be more in their dominating energy and just power through life and take care of themselves. But with this lack of safety in the back of their mind, like, what if I get attacked? What if I get hurt? What if I get abused? What if I get taken advantage of? Or even worse, like historically, things that could have happened. So there's this shift that needs to happen, and this is going to take a long time, because I feel that this is one specific area that needs attention unto its own. It's tied in with everything else that we're experiencing, but this particular aspect is going to take a long time to cycle through, to gain trust within ourselves and within the world, but also within relationship. And that was interesting that you said you trust or security or safety was really important for you. Yeah. Having that safety, the feeling of safety, I feel is quite common. And, but it also is important to understand what that actually feels like. And yeah.
I had never experienced that in my life, Tara. Never. I had never experienced what safety was really, especially not from a male perspective, right? I grew up with my mom, single parent. She was playing the roles of both. And, I love what you just said, because it doesn't matter. We don't want to make it gender, whatever. But the fact of the matter is the DNA of a man and the DNA of a woman are two different things, and they have blueprint things that even though we've evolved in society, we've changed, you can't take it away. It's in their blood and in our blood as women. And I agree that the fact that there's been this unbalance with women becoming more masculine and men kind of like not knowing what to do. And I see this all the time. I see this all the time. Women are a big, big problem in their own relationships with their men because they're completely in control. They're not letting themselves receive and their man take care of them. And it doesn't mean financially, right? It has nothing to do with it. So they feel completely lost in their role because it's innate in them to provide, to protect. It's innate. So we can't forget that. It doesn't matter how it's like. So that's why it's there's certain things that you still need to do in relationship, as independent as, you know, masculine driven you are, that will not service you if you keep doing that. So it's and I think that's why there's been a lot of loss, and that's why people are so protected in their hearts the way they are, is because they don't feel safe and nobody's creating safe space for them. So we have to start over. So yes, it could take a while.
Yeah, exactly.
One person at a time, right? One person at a time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And it is step by step. It's step by step. It's everything that you mentioned here is just, it's the way to create the change within ourselves, and it will happen more and more so outwardly. So as we wrap up here, let's look at the 2024 trends that we had a little chat prior. So I'd love to hear more about that, what you're seeing happening in the relationship world and what's trending as far as current statistics.
Well, funny enough, I was mentioning this before we started the episode, that I had to write an article on 2024 trends and look into the different generations, and including Gen Z, which I was like, ooh, I know nothing about this. I actually need to make a few phone calls and research this, and which I did. So, you know, dating apps are not going anywhere at any time soon. So they still are one of the main components for people to meet. And let's talk about the good about dating apps, right? You have access to a pool of people that you would never have access to if you were living in a city and didn't really have technology around you. So there's accessibility. So open your horizons. And I think that it's really important as well to open what we think we want, right? We often think we have a type, so we limit ourselves. Think outside the box. Think outside the box, especially when you're doing the dating apps. Try to go to people that have good content, have something to say, and explore that. Because as I said, you know, they might not be the most attractive when you first look at them, but what if they have this amazing heart and this amazing personality, and you grow into, you know, really finding sexy and hot? You just never know. The other thing I'm seeing, obviously the video call thing on dating apps, which I love. There's much more of that, and they've all kind of incorporated that on the actual apps. One of the things that I'm seeing a lot of, and I love it, is especially in the older generation, 40s and up, is people are recontacting high school sweethearts that they had a massive connection with when we were in high school or just in our early 20s, university. And they're reconnecting. And listen, in 20, 30 years, you change, you go through stuff, and a lot of people might have been separated, divorced, or whatever. So when we had a connection, I always say you can meet the right person at any given time, but it's not the right time for you both. So
Right.
I've been seeing a lot of great success stories with that. And I love that, because that also can take you out of the regular pool that you're used to seeing, or let's say, the city. You never get out of your own city, so you can actually revisit things from the past that were actually good, but you were just, you know, too young. So those are great. And the other thing that I'm seeing, because of, and I love this, Gen Z, excuse me, and I'm taking the time to say this because there's much more social media. The good news about it is that they have access to a lot more information. So they're a lot more intentional. And I say that, but I'll also close up with the thing. They're more intentional. They're more aware about, mental health and taking care of themselves and learning to communicate boundaries, which is great. And I was actually listening to a podcast 2 days ago that they were saying in the data that Gen Z were going to be the people that have the best marriages in the
Oh,
last,
wow.
I was like really surprised on that. I was like,
Okay,
wow,
the
this is
evolution is happening. That's
the
nice.
evolution is happening. So, meetup, doing things and going to events where you have your interests. So, or any facility that has a self-care thing. So we were talking about earlier, that I was saying othership, which is the infrared sauna and
Mm,
cold plunge, massive community of people that you can meet there. And
mm.
you're in a vulnerable state because you're half naked, right? And you're really being vulnerable and taking care of yourself. So it's like anything that has to do with self-care is massively a new hotspot for people to meet and connect and have great conversation. And I love that.
Mm.
And then, to wrap it up, this is the thing that I noticed that was I don't know if it's a trend. I don't think it's a trend, but it's definitely popped up as I was going through this homework, is that even though we're more intentional, or some generations want to have a little bit more depth, we're all craving human connection like never before. Like that
Mm.
is like, I see it across the board, but there's that disconnect of wanting to actually invest and open our hearts. And that is whether you are 20, 40, 50, 60. So we really need to ask ourselves the right questions, because we are actually a lot of our own problem. It's like, how can I show up better and be a little bit more open? And if I'm not ready, well, maybe I need to do a few, exercises and self-reflection on myself before I actually put myself out there.
Mm.
So I think the trick is there to do a little bit what I shared earlier. Whereas, like, where can you be more vulnerable and open with people in other areas of your life? So you kind of practice this skill. And I think since COVID, we've all lost that, right?
Yeah.
We're isolated. So we've gotten really comfortable with that. And I hear it all the time. Like, people, when they get together, they're like so happy, but it's so hard to get there. So we all need to do the extra effort and go the extra mile and schedule that date with a girlfriend, or go for a coffee, or do a phone call. Right now, it's like it's text messaging or emails. We don't even have a phone call anymore. And it's super
Hmm.
important. We take the time to have
Hmm.
conversations. We don't
Yeah.
do it every day, but we do them, and we'll talk for an hour. And it's so great. We've
Hmm.
developed such a beautiful, safe space with open hearts, because we invest the time, right? We invest the
Hmm.
time, and we create that space for us. And we've developed a beautiful friendship through that. And by the
Hmm.
way, audience, Tara and I have never met in person,
It's
but it's
true.
true. Like it's
It's
like,
almost like it doesn't matter. It's just
yeah.
I know you so well, you know me so well. I know it's odd when you think about it, but I don't but it's not. I don't know, it's beautiful.
But
Yeah.
it just shows the part of how human connection happens when you make that space.
Hmm.
I was telling you that I was at a retreat in Maui. I was with 8 other people, strangers that I had never met. And as I was working through this whole thought process of the article I had written of how is it that people want human connection, disconnect, but they don't want to invest time, they don't want to open their heart, and it's always the excuses. And I realized, well, here I am, 3 days with 8 different people. I heard stuff, as I said earlier, that they had probably never shared with their own best friend, because we had a safe space. We were listening, right?
Hmm.
We made that space. It's really important to listen, be interested in people, be
Hmm.
curious, ask themselves questions.
Ask them questions. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
be
Yeah.
interested. I
Hmm.
always give the best examples whenever you go to a networking event or a party, and we get introduced to someone, we forget their names in 2 seconds. And I remember every single time somebody remembers my name, I feel friggin' important. I'm just like, holy shit, that person remembered my name. And it's just remembering my name because they gave a shit. They gave a
Hmm.
shit. So imagine if that has that power on a person, just listening and asking questions. How are you doing today?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What's happening in your life? Anything you want to talk about? Like, I know it sounds corny, but it's true.
It's not. And I've been witnessing this so much lately. I don't know, it's just such a big has a big presence in my life right now with a lot of people, and I'm seeing there's a huge disconnect with people actually reaching out and just saying, how are you doing, how are you feeling, not to me necessarily, but even just in conversation. There's this gap. It's just me, my story, my life, this and that, and by the end of it I just get so drained
Mhm.
listening to that, where and I'll give them my time and listen, and because I love that. I love hearing about other people, and I get what it like, but it's yeah, there's a huge disconnect there somewhere. But
Yeah, but your
yeah.
lesson, Tara, is to actually say it to the
Mm,
person, right? We need to say it. If we don't feel we're getting it, we also need to take ownership of communicating that we're not getting it. I remember
mm,
I had a girlfriend that we would always, she was business and I was relationship, we would bounce off each other. Okay, and I'm going to help you with this, I'm going to do that. So we had that. And then all of a sudden it went from zero to, she would just call me. And I knew as soon as she would call me, there was a boy problem.
mm,
I knew it. And there was not, how am I, what's going on?
mm.
Can I help you? Can I do anything for you? And I finally, at one point, she called me one day and she was going through a really tough time. And I said, I'm sorry, I have to tell you this today. I know you're already having a shit day, but this is what's happening. And I just communicated how I felt. And I told her, I said, I love you enough and your friendship means enough to me, but you need to know this. Like, this is not cool for me. I'm not your
Yeah.
coach. I'm your friend.
Hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Overstepping the boundaries of your friend, your friends first. You're the coach as a professional. That's your job. And so not taking advantage of that.
Yeah. So I
Yeah.
think we need to take ownership on our needs and
Mhm.
communicate them as well when we're not getting what we want. If you have the conversation and it doesn't have that end result, well, that's a whole other level of thing. But we love to think that people automatically think because we give something, they should give it back, or I'm like that, so they should be like that. And that's a big disconnect too, because we have these expectations towards people because of how we think, how we're raised, and nobody's raised like us, nobody thinks like us, nobody has been through the same shit as us. So we really have to get better at owning our needs and communicating them.
Yeah, exactly. Chantal, thank you so much. I
Thank
love
you.
this. It was so delightful hearing everything, everything.
Thank you.
I'm
Thank
sure
you.
we could probably talk more, but let's wrap it up here. I'll send a link out, of course, with your book where to purchase it. It's on Amazon, isn't it? Now, is it
Yes,
ready for sale? Okay.
ready for, well, it's still on pre-order until February 14th, but it's available
Okay.
on Amazon.com, CA, Barnes and Nobles, and all kinds of stuff. So with the link, you'll have people will be able to have the choice on where to order it from. And
Wonderful.
if you are in Toronto on February 14th, come and celebrate with me in person.
I
We're doing a
wish.
Valentine's Day
Oh, that'd be
party.
so
I
fun.
know.
Oh, fun. Well, I love watching your growth with this work, and it's been really exciting and inspiring. So thank you again, Chantel, for being
Thank
here.
you. Thank you for having me.